How y'all doing? I'd like to talk about a guy who, when I was a kid, I would see this guy's artwork all the time when I was going to the library and such looking for anything about dinosaurs. And while he's dated today, he left a huge lasting impression on the future people who particularly want to do paleo artistry. His name is Charles R. Knight. You can find out about him in this book, Charles R. Knight, The Man Who Saw Through Time, by Richard Miller and done by Abram Books. His granddaughter does an introduction to him. He was born in Brooklyn in 1874, and you look at his stuff, he's done a tremendous amount of iconic and brilliantly done work. It was done during the entire life of deteriorating eyesight. He inherited his father's astigmatism and nearsightedness, and as a boy he got hit in the head with a rock that did some eye damage, and then later in his life he developed cataracts. This left him in trouble with one of his patrons there. See, one of his major payers. He worked mainly for the American Museum of Natural History in New York. Henry Fairfield Osborn was the guy at the time, and because of his bad eyesight, it was hard for him to crank out the work, on time. There was deadlines. Osborn would just think, oh, he's just stalling or everything, but no, it's hard for him to keep up. And this had led to a lot of issues involving money and such, which he was bad at to begin with, because it was hard for him to manage money. He didn't care much for it. He had to be given singles. This is mentioned in the book. He had, I think his wife or daughter would give him singles, so when he goes to the store, he could pay with that without paying too much. If give him anything 5 or 10, he would just put it on the counter and just walk out without even getting change. Despite such interesting flaws, he would produce a very strong body of work, particularly in paleontology. He does a lot of good classic dinosaurs. The famous one you'll see in the slideshow, the T-Rex versus the Triceratops. I've seen a version of that picture often. Well, it may not be accurate, but it's still a good dramatic piece, and he did that one. He got a lot of notes of how dinosaurs were from Edward Drinker Cope. Many of you paleontology buffs will know of him from the bone wars between him and O.C. Marsh, but he met him for a few weeks before he died. But he got a lot out of it, and he used that into his art. And I also think that he was, well, the dinosaurs are out of date, and they're still wonderful to look at. They are out of date, but his Cenozoic art with the mammoths and early humans and the saber-toothed cats still, I think, hold up today. They don't seem as dated, but mammals for him are easy to draw, and he did draw them well because he paid close attention to anatomy. He did not use photographs or sculptures to do his animals. He went to the zoo and drew them live. So, and he got to pay attention to it. I think he did a little taxidermy in his early career working in a museum. That way, and back then, you know, the early taxidermy was just sticking rods up, barely, posing the animals correctly. He found a way to him, or he was in a group that finally made it to where the animals were presented in an accurate fashion. So, he drew well because he paid attention to animal anatomy. He loved drawing animals, particularly cats. Loved cats. And one of the pictures you see in the slideshow is two men against a tiger using a spear. He didn't mind drawing such things if it looked like the tiger could win. But that's not all. And I don't know if this is, it's been a while since I've read this, but it mentions that at the zoo at the time, he would, in the Elephant Palace, he would sculpt the elephant heads in the Elephant Palace at the zoo. I don't know if it's still there. Let me know if it is. But I think it's like the New York City Zoo, and there's the Elephant Palace, if it's still there, and there's elephant sculpting heads, he did that. He also drew the buffalo dollar, or the $10 bill that has the buffalo on the back. I don't know if you're coin collectors and collectors of bills, know about that, but he drew that, or at least that was derived from one of his drawings. In one museum, he did a mural of Native American creation. But let's see, I'm working on a series of notes there from the book I got. But But despite all of this, he died in 1953. He was a huge inspiration to paleo artists from there on out. And then I would say, he would go as far as like Frank Frazetta is in fantasy art, how huge of an influence he is. If you study paleo art at all, you can't talk about it without Charles R. Knight into the picture. And there was also another guy at the time named Burian. I don't know much about him, but I've seen his art all the time, and I looked at it as a kid. But him and Charles R. Knight, Knight was the American paleo artist that influenced a lot of people into paleo art. So there you go. Here it is. Check out this book and understand what stuff I just said, plus more about him. Charles R. Knight, The Man Who Saw Through Time by Richard Miller, by Abram Books. Easy to find. It's only about, a couple years old, copyright. No, it doesn't matter. Still a good book to read. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. There's going to be a few other books about paleo artistry that I'll get into in time. So thank you very much. Thanks for watching. You have a nice day.